Recording from our respective locations, I'm Public Affairs Director Matthew Huffman, and this is Momentum, a webcast produced by your coalition connecting advocates across our state. So this is the month of July, and I'm very excited to welcome two new guests to Momentum. I've known both of these advocates for a long time and have had the privilege of working alongside them in a variety of ways, but it's the first time that we are all in conversation together. And before we started recording, we even made a note of these two advocates are in two very different parts of the state and have never actually been able to meet face to face or, in the pandemic times, even over Zoom. So I'm excited to welcome you both to Momentum and to engage in this conversation with you both. So Michelle, Megan, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to have you on here, and I'm also really excited about this conversation that we're going to have today. To give a bit of context for folks before we jump in, I do want to say, like I had mentioned, we're recording from our respective locations. For me, that's my home office. But for the two of you, y'all are actually back on site working in your shelter locations. As I am well aware of from working in shelter in the past, and I think all our listeners are, hotlines ring, coworkers come in and out, things happen. So if that happens while we're recording today, all the better. We'll just roll with it.
Yep, that's the reality of the work we do.
Yep, very much. So I'll also get us started by giving listeners a bit of context for the conversation we're going to have today. And MCA DSV has provided space for advocates of color to meet and network and support one another really since the 1990s. And in the earliest of days, that was providing meeting space at our annual conferences. But since then, we have really started to hold monthly people of color meetings for advocates at member agencies who identify as people of color to really meet and support one another more regularly, and especially now in the pandemic, being able to provide that space virtually for folks to connect. Around this time last year, it was actually July 2020, so it marks the 1-year anniversary of MCA DSV launching another racial equity initiative, our Show Me Connections groups. We get a lot of questions from advocates who want to be engaged in conversations about racial equity, racial justice of, is this group right for me? Is this group better suited for me? How can we really be engaged in these conversations in our organizations with our fellow advocates? But I think more importantly, how do we really engage in conversation about racial justice in the larger sexual and domestic violence movement, and really making those connections between power, privilege, and oppression and how it relates to our work? So Megan, you've been involved in the POC group for a long time. Michelle, you were really active in Show Me Connections, and I thought this would be a great opportunity for all of us to get together and dig a little deeper into that conversation.
Sure.
So to get us started, I'm gonna start with you, Megan. Could you tell us, how long have you been at North Star Advocacy Center? Give us a little context for the work you do. And then can you also tell us about how long you've been involved in the POC group?
Sure. So I walked in, so at the time, this organization was called Children and Family Center of Northwest Missouri. And just last year, we got the name changed over to what's now, it's called North Star Advocacy Center. So I walked in these shelter doors about 12 years ago. And started out here as a volunteer, and then with the intention to complete my internship here. It was never the goal to be a victim advocate and to stay in the field. I had other plans in mind, and at the time I thought, like, well, if I end up liking this job, it's just like I can do this on the weekends type of thing. So, but then as I started the work, and it was really going to court and honestly seeing the injustices there, it really made me angry, and therefore drove this passion that I guess I just didn't realize that I had. And I just ended up kind of falling in love with the work. And And here I am 12 years later. So I've been employed here, so about probably 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. But then I walked in the doors here about 12 years ago. And so as a court and victim advocate, I now do all of the court stuff. So I help with order protections. Anytime there's a criminal charge for domestic violence or sexual assault, I go and collaborate with the prosecuting attorney and then the Fourth Circuit victim advocate. And we work together with those people that are going through the court process. And that can take, as we all know, a really long time to do. And it's very, very difficult. So that's the court aspect. Victim advocacy, I mean, I help with people who are here in shelter and do action planning and safety planning and try to provide resources and connect them to resources and really just listen to them. Over the years, I have led different support groups. I've led our domestic violence support group. Now I lead our, I co-lead our sexual assault support group. And then just also the non-residents, so the people who come in through our doors that don't necessarily need shelter, but they need someone to listen to them or someone to help them out just the same, and who either aren't ready to leave or don't need shelter, but still need that emotional support and the help and the resources. So I help with that. And then here just recently, I took over the volunteer coordinator position. So now I'm in charge of the interns and supervise the volunteers as well and come up with different tasks and fun things for them to do. And I do quite a bit of public speaking, and I haven't for quite a while. So I seem really, I feel really rusty on that just because of the pandemic. You know, we were doing some presentations over Zoom, but for the most part, there just wasn't a lot of public speaking. So yeah, that's primarily what I do as an advocate here.
I think I heard you name off 12 different hats that you wear.
Yeah.
Well, and I've also had the privilege of getting to work with you over the years on some of those public speaking engagements that you do. You're really involved in campus outreach. I've been able to work with you on the support groups that you run for trying to engage male identifying survivors. So like I mentioned, I think that you're wearing about 12 different hats up there, but are doing really amazing work up in Northwest Missouri.
Thank you. And then to answer the third part of the question, I've been in the People of Color meetings. I didn't attend the one at the coalition conference. I think it was back in 2018 was the last one. But then that following year, someone from the coalition called and asked if I was interested in joining. And so I think I joined sometime in 2019.
All right. Thanks, Megan. Michelle, I'm going to turn it over to you for an introduction. So if you could let folks know where you work and what you do there, and then kind of in a similar question that I gave to Megan, what made you want to get involved in Show Me Connections?
Sure. I'm with St. Martha's. I'm the program director now. I've been here 20 years. I started as an advocate on our day shift, also did volunteer coordination in that role, moved to the evening shift to do support groups, left for a couple of years and they brought me back and now I'm the program director. So, you know, I don't get to work with the women quite as much as I like. I do a lot of administrative work, but that's me. How I got involved in the Show Me Connections, MCADSV was sort of publicizing it, communicating about the opportunity, and we at St. Martha's decided, you know what, this is something is really important. And we asked everybody here to be involved with it if they could work it into their schedule. We really, really encouraged it. I wanted to be part of the anti-racism work. I wanted St. Martha's to be part of it. And I'm happy to say a lot of our advocates, myself included, jumped on the opportunity. Because we wanted to learn how to best respond. And we wanted to share and learn from folks who are in settings and sort of more like-minded like us in terms of how do we work with for anti-racism work, but within what we do here.
Thank you, Michelle. And I remember whenever I first started at the coalition and St. Louis was one of my regions I was working in, getting to meet you at a regional meeting. And it always really meant a lot to me that you would make time to come up and say hello. So that's something that's always really stuck with me. And And in your Show Me Connections group, I was the staff member who helped kind of get that started and get y'all up and running. And something that you said to me early on was just what you said here, that you all made the decision at St. Martha's to really encourage all staff to participate, and that you all felt a really strong sense of we need to be engaging in these conversations. So let's take the time for all staff to have that opportunity.
Yes, yeah, I think that was really important to us. During this pandemic, I have a weekly Zoom with a personal support group, one a member is my sister. And after the killing of George Floyd, we, of course, wanted to know, all right, what can we do? We need to do something. We need to act. And she would always say, you can act locally. You can act locally. You watch the news and you feel so hopeless. So that, act locally, I would think, where can I be an agent of change locally? Boots on the ground at St. Martha's.
I really appreciate what you just said of thinking deeply about what can I do, and then really putting that into practice of act locally. So in your community, and just like you said, boots on the ground at St. Martha's, acting locally can have such a major impact that then ripples out.
I hope. That's our hope.
So, Michelle, I do want to follow up really quickly on that. Your Show Me Connections group met regularly through 2020. So I'm curious if you can kind of share what helped that momentum go along, what really encouraged your group to be able to make that commitment every month.
Part of it may have just been luck. We had good chemistry, perhaps. We started with a larger group, and some folks kind of fell off, and there was a core of about 4 or 5 of us who just stuck with it. It may have been, I'd like to give a shout out to Diana Cameron. She's an advocate here at St. Martha's. She was the facilitator of our Show Me Connections group, and she did a great job of reminding folks of the upcoming meetings, of making sure the meeting times were convenient for everybody. We always scheduled a meeting before signing off. So part of it may have just been luck and just good chemistry, but also good communication.
I think that that's a really important thing that you said, and I want to lift that up, that it was good chemistry, but also good communication. And I think that that's such a really key thing to being able to engage in thoughtful dialogue about racial equity and justice is good communication and keeping that open dialogue. So Megan, I want to turn it back over to you and ask, in the course of your involvement in the People of Color networking group, how have you been able to kind of see things change over time? Are there any things in the last few years that you've seen that have made a really big impact?
I think the fact that the People of Color meetings are always open to evolving. Things are, like Michelle mentioned, you can get bombarded and feel down because of what you turn on the TV and see, or turn on the radio and hear. And so there's always space in the People of Color meetings to talk about what's currently going on, but then also how that's affecting people as well. And but then if we just don't want to talk about the the news or anything like that, then there's room for talking about other things that's impactful. So just to kind of give an example, so last year it was talking a lot about the pandemic and how that's affecting each and every person at their organization. And then in the midst of that, again, as Michelle mentioned, and there was the death of George Floyd, and so that had a huge impact. And the group is very open to we just talked about that type of thing, and how that impacted each one of us individually, and then as an organization, and as in our community. And we're able to have that open space, safe space to be able to engage with each other and hear each other out. And then also it just kind of, we always try to keep it open in that we talk about self-care and how are you taking care of yourself, and it always remains to be an open space. I'm always impressed because there's always room for other ideas too. So here just recently we've incorporated movies or TV shows or books and that type of thing. So it's not always such a like a deep and sad topic like like the death or something like that, but also positive things too, or not like talking about a TV show. It's like, yeah, and this is kind of fun. And then I know that the last time we talked about this TV show called A Million Little Things, and it talks about a lot of like racial issues and diversity and that type, and different things like that. So there's just room to talk about that. And then also leaving space to be able to talk about personal experiences that maybe there's not safety to talk about that elsewhere, or maybe there's just not the same type of conversation that can happen elsewhere that can happen in this group. So that's kind of my experience in the past couple of years that I've been in it, of how I've not necessarily seen it grow, but just how it's just always so open to be able to evolve and just and talk about what's going on, and also talking about what people just feel the need to talk about or want to talk about.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your experience in attending the meetings. And I really love what you said about it has a space to be able to evolve and to meet the needs of advocates who are participating. And I really love what you said about it. It almost sounds to me like every meeting is an opportunity to connect and just be what you need it to be in the space. So if it is something that needs to have a deeper conversation, or if it is a space to have lighter conversation and connect, it's really listening to what is going to work for the group in that moment. And I want to lift up something else that you said in terms of, I kind of almost heard it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I certainly don't want to speak for you, but it's really hard for us to sometimes separate the personal from our professional lives. And that's a space for you all to connect on both.
I would say that's absolutely correct.
I think that that's such a really important thing for us to consider and give grace to ourselves and to our fellow advocates. Is sometimes it can be really difficult to separate the personal from the professional. And in our job, it feels so personal all the time in the work that we do, because we're working with people who have experienced trauma. We know that they're sharing some of the most traumatic and most intimate experiences with us, and it's hard to not internalize that when we also feel that trauma too, as well as just the sometimes community trauma that we feel from being overwhelmed with what we see in media. And so I just wanted to kind of tease that out, that, it is really difficult to separate that out. And I appreciate when we are able to give each other that space and grace to say, we don't always have to separate it out.
I agree.
So I have a question for both of you. And Megan, I'll get it started with you. Your being able to participate in the POC meetings isn't just dependent on MCA DSV providing the space. It's really dependent on your organization allowing you the time and space to participate. And so I wonder if you can talk a bit about how your organization has really made the commitment of, this is important for our staff to be able to participate in.
Sure. I think that my coworkers and I were a small staff, and I think that helps benefit the types of conversations that we get to openly have with each other. So we're a pretty close staff, and I love the openness and ability to have conversations, even if we disagree, with each other. There's always room for that. And I think that that's really important. I think it's important for us not to all think the exact same way, and I think that we learn from each other, we grow with each other, especially when there's diverse opinions, and so my coworkers, I just, boastfully and happily say that, we've always been able to all sit down and have those conversations, and maybe not all as a group all of the time, just because, again, the phone's ringing and that type of thing, but at least one-on-one, or the three of us, and then, even better when it's all of us. So first of all, that's always been a good thing about this organization, just internally as far as the staff goes. Like, we are always have been able to have those conversations. And I just think that it's important for organizations to be able to, allow the staff to be able to also engage with other people about different things too, because I learned so much from the People of Color meetings. It's not just about me sharing, bad things or things that I'm going through or how things affected me, but also for me to sit back and pause and listen to other people's experiences too. And because we're up here in rural Missouri, and it's important, for that voice to be heard, but then I also want to hear from others as well. And then from that, I don't share the personal things that are shared in the meetings, but to take away the concepts and the ideas and to be able to bring those back to the conversations that we have here as a staff. And then that better helps the diversity in clients that we serve as well. Because as we all know, domestic violence and sexual violence doesn't discriminate against race or against your age or against your gender, against how much money you make. It affects all across the board. And so in turn, those conversations, and I know my director is involved in a Show Me Connection. She's involved in one of those and attends that. Those things just help the dialogue of those intimate conversations that we have as a staff, therefore able to better help the clients that we serve.
Thank you for sharing that, Megan, both from your perspective and also from your organizations and how y'all have really made that commitment to it. Michelle, a similar question for you. And you had mentioned this earlier, with St. Martha's really encouraging all staff to participate in Show Me Connections if they can. What was that process of making that decision for the organization that you wanted to devote the time and space and encouraging staff to engage in these conversations?
What was the process? Well, like Megan's agency, we were very small, and I can't tell you it was a very long process. It was just simply myself and Jessica, our executive director, saying, we need to do this. It was very simple. But if we look at our work through a trauma-informed lens, we know that racism is a trauma that many of our women who walk through our doors are experiencing, on top of the domestic and sexual violence. So if we want to do the best job that we can for everybody walking through our doors, we have to do this work. So it wasn't a process. It was just like, it was almost a no-brainer. We have to do this. I just right before this meeting, I just had a conversation with one of our advocates here who will be attending a racial equity summit that we also encouraged everybody to attend. And the hours of it don't really fall technically on what her normal work hours are doing. But I love that St. Martha's has the flexibility that we can say, that's okay, adjust your work hours so you can do it. If it falls outside your work hours, come in late the next day. Or another nice thing is it's virtual. So she can do it from home and won't have, the knocking on the door or the interruptions of the crisis phone. We'll do that for her so that she can attend that summit.
That's such a really good example of organizational commitment. So I really appreciate you sharing that. That St. Martha's is committed to allowing for flexibility there and supporting staff who want to be able to engage in racial equity work and figuring out the best way to allow for that to happen. May I also ask, is it the upcoming St. Louis Racial Equity Summit?
Yeah, through the St. Louis Community Foundation.
Yep, I am also attending that along with some other folks on MCA DSV staff, and we are very excited about it. So I'm going to jump back to that a little later toward the end of the conversation, but I made a note not to let that little piece of information go. There was something that both of you said that I made note of, though, to also lift up. And it, I think, directly relates to the advocacy skills that all of us really strive to practice. And so, Megan, something that you had mentioned is participating in the People of Color meetings gives you a time to pause and listen to others' experiences. And I think that that is such a core element to advocacy work, is being able to pause and really hear from other people their experience. And then Michelle, something that you said that I made note of that I also think is really key to our advocacy work is acknowledging that racism is a trauma. And if we do this work in a trauma-informed way, it means recognizing the trauma of racism and oppression that survivors deal with on top of the other traumas that they've experienced. So I really appreciate both of you going into that level of advocacy skill, but how it shows up in our work. So I want to ask both of you, and Megan, I'll get started with you this time again. If you were to get questions from other folks who said, I'm really intrigued in the POC meetings, but I'm not sure if it's the right space for me. For folks who want to get involved, what would you say to them?
I would say that when I was asked by a coalition member, I had the same apprehension and wasn't sure if it was a space for me. And it wasn't anything that anybody said or did, but it was just, I guess personally, I'm just really, I have not throughout my life, haven't been used to talking so openly about those things, and especially as a person of color. And so I would first identify and say, like, I actually understand that apprehension, but then I would follow it up with, but I encourage you to still come. And I would encourage anyone to come because of the things that I've mentioned, is that it's not just a space for myself and maybe, expressing things that haven't been able to be expressed, but also to be able to sit and listen. And I just learn so much, and I'm in awe of everybody that comes and shares what they share and the ideas and the perspectives that they have. It's just very eye-opening, but it's also very validating, and it's very empowering, and it's very uplifting. And so I would encourage them to come, but also understanding, the point where they come from.
Thank you. So Michelle, I'll turn it over to you now with a similar question. If you were to get questions from other advocates asking about your experience in Show Me Connections, and if they want to get involved but aren't quite sure, what might you say to them?
I'd very simply say, go for it. I mean, the only thing to know if it's right for you is to do it. It's very easy to think, well, I have to answer the crisis line, I have to meet with this woman, and this and that, and I have to clean that room in the shelter, and those are all important, valuable things that we do as an advocate. But this too is an important, valuable thing. So I would say go for it. There's no downside. What is the downside? A little bit of risk, maybe. That's a small price to pay. We can handle that.
Yeah. I really appreciate you saying that. A little bit of risk, but we can handle that. I also want to say, from the coalition's perspective, we want to provide, and we do provide, the space for advocates of color to exclusively have the POC meetings, to be able to engage in a safe space conversation. And then our idea with Show Me Connections is, this is an opportunity for all advocates, however they identify, with race, ethnicity, gender identity, calling all advocates into the conversation, while recognizing that, all of us are on a different spectrum in terms of where we are with our own racial justice work. But this is a collective opportunity for us to move forward together in this collective work toward racial equity and justice. And so kind of building on that a little bit, recognizing, racial equity and justice work is something that we're all on a journey on, both individually, in community with one another, and as a movement. And so I'm curious if there are any particular resources, either speakers or movies, films, articles that you found really insightful in your journey. And Michelle, I'll start this one with you.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, as part of the Show Me Connections, MCA DSV provided some Corn Fairy resources. Those videos were tremendous. They really pushed my thinking. We would watch them before we would start the Show Me Connections meeting with our group, and then sort of process them. And then I signed up for their newsletter, so I get that. And it's very informative, and again, it continues to push my thinking. So those were helpful. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence has some tremendous recorded webinars, and those have been very helpful. And what's so great about them being recorded is that not only can I watch them on my time, but our overnight advocate can watch it on her time. So those are two that come to mind. And the St. Louis Community Foundation Racial Equity Summit that we already mentioned.
Yep. Well, excellent. Thank you, Michelle. Megan, I'll turn it over to you.
I actually just recently shared this with the People of Color group, but I recently, within the past few weeks, attended the exhibit that's in Kansas City right now at the at Union Station, and it's the Auschwitz exhibit. And that was, I've attended, or I've visited and gone through quite a few different Holocaust things around the country. And this one has really stuck out, and it's really, the core of it has really stuck with me these past few weeks. And even though Judaism is a religion, I remember reading a specific part going through that exhibit where the point in history where they started being looked at as a race rather than a religion, that furthered the inequity and what we all knew that eventually evolved into the Holocaust. And so that was very eye-opening to me, right? In that part, and then several parts of it. So I would recommend that to people because you learn a lot about the grooming and the way society was, and I guess in short, when you don't have those conversations, and when you don't connect and don't find connection with people and find common ground with people, those are unfortunately the bigger things that have happened in history. So that would be one thing that I have found just like Michelle had mentioned, just really challenged me and pushed me to think of it in even a different perspective than maybe I had before going through other Holocaust exhibits. So that was a really big one that really comes to my mind here right now.
I'm writing that down because I wasn't aware of that exhibit. It's a weekend trip to Kansas City. It's
there till I think January, and a lot of the weekends are booked up. But last I checked, November and December weekends were still open. So, but there's a lot of weekdays that are open.
All right. I also made note of that and really appreciate you sharing that, Megan. That sounds like a really impactful exhibit to go see.
Yeah.
So note for all the other folks in Missouri who are listening, we all might need to take a trip to Kansas City. Well, one that I wanted to share and kind of coming back to the St. Louis Racial Equity Summit, one of their keynote speakers is going to be Adrienne Maree Brown, who is an author and activist and has written a lot about emergent strategies. And I would really encourage folks to look into that. It's a particular facilitation technique, but it has also really challenged me to think about, in my role often as a facilitator of conversation, what does that look like if I don't recognize power and privilege and how that plays into facilitating conversation and dialogue with folks. And I really like a lot of her perspectives on things. So that was why I made a note to come back around full circle to the St. Louis Racial Equity Summit. I'm really excited about it and think there are going to be so many really great things to come out of it. that we on staff who are attending are excited to be able to share out with members too. So we're a big proponent of professional development is not only for oneself, but for sharing with others. And we really feel that way internally about any of the racial equity work that we do. It's not just for ourselves, but to share with others and to challenge each other on.
Fantastic.
So I want to kind of wrap up our conversation by talking about how we collectively call people in to the conversation. And so that's the intent of why we wanted to start Show Me Connections. And like I had mentioned in the beginning, we're a year in now of that initiative, and we've seen it kind of start off strong and then pause and pick back up, and different groups have been able to keep it going at different paces. So we're really thinking deeply about how we continue to support these efforts and continue to call advocates into this conversation. And part of that is us being able to put the call out to other advocates and say, if you all have had opportunities to engage in this conversation with other advocates in your organization, in your community, and you found resources that were really useful, please share those with us. We want to be able to share them out with other people too, and have a robust way of us engaging in the conversation here in Missouri as advocates working toward equity for all people. So I want to put that call out to both of you. What would you say to advocates to call them into these conversations?
You know, I'm sorry, Megan. I jumped right in. Okay. As you were talking, I was thinking, I wonder if base camp would be a way to join us.
Making a note of that right now, Michelle. That's a really great idea. I mean, that's something MCA DSV already has. We support base camp groups for a variety of projects. And that's a great way of building connection. Yeah, so made a note of that just now. Thanks. Megan, any kind of final thoughts from you?
I would say just, as far as engagement of other advocates, I don't know. I would just, venture to just kind of explore the different reasons as to, like, maybe question yourselves as to why, and what do you have to lose, and then also what do you have to gain out of it. And because like I said, it's not just about, if sharing isn't your thing, it's not just, like I've said before, it's not just about you sharing your things, but it's also just about learning from other advocates around the state through experiences, through perspective, through different stages in people's lives. It's just, you can look at it as a huge learning experience and a growth experience as well. And then to be able to take those conversations and come back to the organization. That's what we do as advocates. That's why we go to trainings. That's why we go and do all of these things that aren't always here on home base, and then we bring those ideas back and let that evolve yourself as a professional, but then also as your organization, as the organization. And therefore, I mean, the biggest thing, because we're all advocates, therefore that turns around and is able to help better serve the clients as well, the people that we serve.
Megan, as you were talking, it jogged something in my brain. One thing that we have added since Show Me Connections to our onboarding, our new employee onboarding, is a couple of those training videos that MCADSV has on the website, the Show Me Connections. There's a few videos that were just marvelous. I mentioned before about the Corn Fairy videos. Those are now part of our onboarding. So in terms of calling out to advocates, that I would see that as, as a way we're trying to call out or educate or train, or at least open a conversation when we have a new person come in. We want her to see those, we value those, and then that hopefully would open a conversation, or at least open the door for more education.
Absolutely. And to kind of piggyback off that got me to thinking, we can open that up for the interns as well. So, now that I'm overseeing the interns and the volunteers. And as we train them, I mean, why not? Let's get them on board too. And sometimes they're, that brings in a lot of diversity as well, especially since we have a university right here in our town. So yeah, I mean, I that just got me thinking, it's like, oh, well, why not spread that to the volunteers and interns as well for training?
Lots of potential there.
Yeah, a lot of potential there. I love the idea of embedding that right into onboarding and orientation. And I think that really helps to set a solid foundation of what your organization's values are. So I think that's such a really great example. I appreciate you both sharing that. And, in the final couple of minutes, we just came up with like multiple ideas of calling advocates in to being able to engage in this conversation. So I appreciate the quick brainstorm at the end of the recording.
Well, thank you.
Well, Megan, Michelle, thank you both. I really appreciate your time and your commitment for being on Momentum with me. And also just for your time and commitment to the work that you're doing in your organization and in your communities. So big thanks to you both.
Well, right back at you, Matthew.
Yep. Thank you. And the coalition has always been great. So I'm very thankful for that. The coalition, you guys have always been great at listening and addressing advocates' needs, of course, as well as survivor needs, but, also advocates' needs as well. And so this really, I think that, these ideas have been very, very helpful. So thank you.
Agreed.
Yeah. Well, great. I think that's the perfect message to sign off on. So thank you both.
Great.
Until next time.
Great. Thank you.
Bye.